Good evening and welcome to the news on UTV. One of two men detained following a failed terror attack on Glasgow airport had studied at Queen's University in Belfast. Kathal Ahmed is critically ill in hospital after suffering 90-degree burns during the incident. Scottish police have been unable to question him because of his injuries. Mr Ahmed spent almost 3 years studying here, completing a master's degree. Representatives of the local Muslim community have expressed their shock at his involvement in the attack. 5 male teenagers have been arrested in Strabane after police discovered items which they describe as being of use in the preparation of petrol bombs. The discovery was made during a search of an unoccupied house in the Ballycolman area of the town. Meanwhile, in a separate incident in Omagh, police have found what they describe as a viable pipe bomb device during a planned search of a property on Hospital Road in the town. The Army has admitted it did not beat the IRA. The admission is contained in an internal report into the Army's 37-year deployment here. Tracy McGee reports.
Over 250,000 soldiers have served in Northern Ireland over the last 4 decades. This 37-year deployment, known as Operation Banner, is the longest in the Army's history. It's due to end at the end of the month, but before that the Army has carried out its own analysis of its role here. The findings of its study are contained in a 98-page report. It was released by the Ministry of Defence following a request under the Freedom of Information Act. Tellingly, it concedes that the Army did not win against the IRA. Instead, the report said it succeeded in bringing the violence down to such a level that it made clear to the IRA that it would not win through violence. The authors describe the IRA as professional, educated, highly skilled and resilient. Loyalists are dismissed as little more than gangsters. The lessons learned in Northern Ireland have been at the centre of subsequent operations. It says the generally positive experience of Northern Ireland stood the Army well in theatres such as Kuwait, the Balkans, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan and Iraq. Only 2 instances are singled out for criticism. One of them happened early in the conflict, the Falls Road curfew in 1970. For 3 days, a state of virtual martial law was imposed on the Lower Falls Road area. It was described as hasty and poor military decision-making. The other episode singled out is Bloody Sunday. The report makes no direct reference to the 14 civilians who were shot that day. Instead, it said officers should not have used vehicles to approach the crowd. That was described as hasty and heavy-handed. Relatives of the dead are furious.
The fact that the only lesson apparently that they learned from that day was the fact that they used heavy vehicles. Now, it doesn't take into consideration the lesson learned from the murder of 14 individuals, the attempted murder of 14 others, and even the use of one of these vehicles in relation to a young girl, Lana Burke, who was actually badly injured and crushed by one of these vehicles. So therefore, the human life content does not seem to come into it through this report.
This report makes for fascinating reading, not least of all because it's the first time the Army has examined its role in Northern Ireland. But perhaps most tragic of all is the report's assertion that the conflict could have been ended on 3 occasions. In 1969, when the violence first erupted, in the mid-1970s, and again in the early 80s. The report's authors say those opportunities were lost because of a lack of political will. After those dates, a further 1,400 people lost their lives. Tracy McGee, UTV Live, Belfast.
For over 40 years, they've been a part of the skyline of Belfast, but it was a case of going, gone today for 3 chimneys at an old power station in the shadow of Harland and Wolff. When it opened in 1961, it was the largest coal-fired station and employed over 400 people. And after 18 months of preparation, demolition experts finally pushed the button and all the chimneys came crashing down in a series of controlled explosions. And that's all from UTV for now. The local weather forecast is next. From all of us here, good night.